Hello. Wow, this is such a great crowd. Thank you all so much for braving the storm out there and spending your Friday evening with us. My name is Amali, and I'm the events director here at Books Are Magic. We are so excited to have Chelsea G. Summers and Nina Haines with us tonight for the first ever in-person U.S. book event celebrating Chelsea's best-selling debut novel, A Certain Hunger. Before we get into all of that, I just have a few logistics to point out for how tonight's event is going to go. First off, mask wearing is optional at tonight's event, but if you'd like one, we have some extras up at the front where you checked in. We will be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end of the discussion, so please start thinking of questions to ask and hold on to them. After the talk tonight, Chelsea will be signing and personalizing books at the table next to where you checked in. We'll let you know where and when to start lining up for that. And lastly, if you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we would love to encourage you to buy a copy of A Certain Hunger online using the link in the live stream description. All right, let's get into this. There are many good reasons why this book is all over BookTok, Bookstagram, BookTube, etc., etc., etc. Following a food critic who develops a taste for a peculiar kind of meat, this novel has been hailed as riotously funny and deliriously unhinged, and it is our true pleasure to have Chelsea here to tell us more about how this wild story came to be. Chelsea G. Summers is a former academic and college professor with PhD training in 18th century British literature. A freelance writer, Chelsea's work has appeared in New York Magazine, The New Republic, The Guardian, and other fine publications. She splits her time between New York and Stockholm, Sweden. As I mentioned earlier, A Certain Hunger is her first novel. And as I also mentioned before, Nina Haines joins Chelsea in conversation tonight. Nina is a marketer, writer, and creator based here in Brooklyn. In 2021, she founded a queer book club called Staff Lit, which now has over 7,000 members from over 60 countries. Staff Lit reads two books a month and strives to be a safe space where sapphic women and non-binary people can come read sapphic books, chat about life, ask for and offer support, and celebrate their identities. All right, that's all from me. Without any further delay, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Chelsea and Nina.
Hey, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Can y'all hear me? Cool? Mm-hmm. All right. Hey, besties. How we doing? Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you, Chelsea, for choosing me to talk about A Certain Hunger with you. When we were getting drinks earlier, I was telling her that this is my litmus test for people. Like, if you don't like A Certain Hunger, it's a red flag for me. So really excited to ask all my burning questions about the book. So yeah, let's get started.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you, Books Are Magic.
So this is your debut novel, published in December 2020, and it's now in its fourth printing, Galactic Slay. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And A Certain Hunger seemingly came at the perfect time, at the beginning of two cultural phenomenon. There's BookTok, which, if you know me from BookTok, hello, and our media's current obsession with cannibalism. So we'll get into that later, but I first want to take us back to 2011 when you started writing this book. Can you give us some background on the conception and how the fuck you came up with this idea?
Yeah. So I was going to Italy for my job, and a friend of mine on Facebook was like, "Oh, you can write Eat, Pray, Love." I was like, well, I'll write Love, Pray, Eat, the cannibalist, rom-com that nobody's asked for. And then I went to Italy. I had my heart broken. I came back after 4 or 5 months of just being extraordinarily lonely. And why is this? Oh, I just got a text of rain in New Orleans. I was like, I need a new project, and this man keeps on haunting me, and I just want to kill him, and so I did. And so I went back I did a bunch of research over that summer. I went back to Italy that following fall. all, I sat on a shabby chic couch in a just, oh, for fuck's sake, punishingly cold, 17th century villa. I mean, like, seriously, there was one like wood stove that kept it warm the size of a personal pan pizza. And I wrote this scene where Dorothy accidentally on purpose hits and runs, kills Giovanni. And I initially expected that to be the first scene in the book. It didn't end up being the first scene. And that guy was entirely based on my, Italian boyfriend.
How cathartic.
It really
I love
was.
that.
Yeah. I mean, the whole process was incredibly cathartic.
Yeah.
Yeah, catharsis is right. WRITE.
I love that. So you're very critical of publishing and media in general, in A Certain Hunger. And I've been following on social media. If you don't follow Chelsea on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, please do. Little plug. And you have a sort of series where you share publishing income transparency, which is so refreshing and I feel important to talk about. Can you discuss why you chose to share that information and what that reaction has been?
Yeah, so when people see a best-selling book, they think the writer is rolling in money. I have made, in total, not taking out like my agency fees or taxes, about $35,000 for the North American publishing of A Certain Hunger. That includes my $2,000 advance, and it includes the royalties that I've gotten, and that's it. I have made other money from options. I've made money from Audible. I've made money from foreign rights. But it's not a lot of money, not when you put it together with how many hours I spent writing it, how many hours I spent editing it and re-editing it and, querying agents and the whole, cavalcade of stuff that goes into publishing. And I feel like a lot of what media does is similar to what fashion does, which is to obscure the actual labor and the actual cost and the actual profit of, what the art is making. And so I decided to publish my, last royalty statement with the idea of let's be transparent about what does an indie debut author make. And it's no shade to Unnamed. They've been great. I love them. They've been super supportive and they really got my book out there. And, they took a chance on it when, seriously, 35 other places said no. But, I frequently see reactions about this book on social media where people think I'm just, rolling in money, and God, I hope someday I am.
Love that. Manifesting for you.
Thank you.
For all of us. So you found me, as many people do, on TikTok, unfortunately, talking about one of my niche special interests, which is art history and book covers. Classical paintings make really great book covers because you don't have copyright issues with them because the artists are dead. So I think one of the many reasons why this book blew up on TikTok is because the cover is a sleigh. It's so striking, and I want to, if I may, rant a little bit about this painting and the background of it. So it shows the Lady Gimonda holding her dead lover's heart and squeezing the blood from her dead lover's heart into a cup of poison. And her father did not approve of her lover, killed him, and delivered his heart to her. And she was like, I don't want to live anymore, so I'm just gonna eat his heart and kill myself. Which we love urinating. But anyways, back to BookTok. I'd love to hear about what blowing up on BookTok has been like for you. It was really 2 years after the publication. It really exploded, and now the Certain Hunger hashtag has over 8 million views on TikTok.
Yeah, 8.2.
Yeah, so what's that been like?
Yeah, it was really wild. I knew fuck all about BookTok. I mean, I had downloaded, like everybody else, I had downloaded TikTok during the pandemic because I had to see sea shanties for no apparent reason, and then I saw my fill of sea shanties, and I was like, all right, I'm done. And then at some point around the holidays of 2021, I was like, oh, I wonder if my book's on BookTok. That would be interesting. And so like I looked up the title and I didn't really find anything, and then I found a few things, and then I found like hashtag unhinged women, and I was like, oh, okay, Bing spot, I'm there. And I looked and looked and looked, and I kept on seeing more and more, and then I began interacting with creators, which like I did in a non-committal kind of way, because I think what creators really want is free stuff, and also and you know, acknowledgement, like just, you know, a little bit of engagement. So I would do a couple of emojis like heart, knife, blood drop. And it made people really, really happy, like inordinately happy. And I was like, all right, cool, we're into this. And from there it just sort of began snowballing, and that was pretty crazy. And in general, the responses have been wildly positive, which is really gratifying, because when I wrote this book, I never thought, I really was like, my mantra was, it doesn't have to be good, it just has to be done. It doesn't have to be good, it just has to be done. And then I like finished, and it turned out, you know, it was all right. And I didn't envision an audience. When I envisioned an audience, I envisioned like a group of people, like the people who read Geek Love, you know, who like know that book, feel that book, the book stays with them. They are like, if you are a close friend, you get a copy of Geek Love, like that is a token of, you know, your inner self. And so like that's what I wanted to write. Like, so when people are like, oh my God, I love your book so much, it meant so much to me, I'm like, well, I wrote it for you. And I seriously did. I wrote it for those people for whom it hits. And so the people who don't like it, and there are plenty, and find it boring or find it pretentious, like, duh, it's pretentious, no shit, like, well spotted. Like, you know, or other, you know, like, like, it's white lady feminism. Well, yeah, she's a terrible person. Of course it's white lady feminism, you know? Like, and so, like, it's fine. Like, you can't control it once a book goes out into the world. So the best you can hope for is that there will be people who find it and like it, and so fortunately you did.
Oh, I loved it. And yeah, I can't believe people are debating like the ethics of a book about a serial killer who like eats people.
Yeah, it really, it's like, well, her feminism wasn't very intersectional. It's like, dude, she's a fucking cannibal. Like, seriously.
Okay.
Where are you putting the bar here?
It's not a reflection of the author's values necessarily. But that's a conversation for a different time. So you mentioned it already. BookTok is obsessed with the unhinged woman character. There's Melissa Broder, Otessa Moshfegh, Mona Awad, Lisa Tadeo, and many more, where these books are kind of considered collectibles among the BookTok universe, and like a certain hunger is necessary to create that perfect unhinged woman book stack video.
Sure. Thank God.
Yeah. And like you said, these characters are typically white, and media has often compared them to American Psycho, which, if you, like me, went to NYU and met a finance bro, some people take a little too seriously. And, you know, don't think of it as satire, for example. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the unhinged woman canon and being included in it.
Yeah, so the unhinged woman is a really helpful trope. It kind of gives you an expectation of where the book is going to go. There's going to be stuff that makes you feel uncomfortable. There's going to be excess. There's going to be decisions that are perhaps not rational. There's going to be somebody who is not conventionally likable. There's going to be these, you know, certain situations. There's probably going to be dick. And, you know, that's total, like, it helps you as you understand how you want to buy the book. it's limiting because, like, a lot of people talk about My Year of Rest and Relaxation as being unhinged. That unnamed narrator is not unhinged in the least. She has a plan. She makes the plan, she sticks to the plan, she does the plan. The plan takes her in unusual places, but that's what plans do, you know, that's what human life is about, is having your plans come undone. Can somebody grab me a tissue from the back? Sorry, I have really bad hay fever. And so like the unhinged woman can be helpful, but it's also not particularly accurate. Like when you're talking about people like the unnamed narrator of My Year in Rest and Relaxation, or for that matter, Dorothy, like she's not particularly unhinged. She has moments when she's unhinged, for sure, but mostly she's pretty frickin' calculated, you know? And
Very hinged.
And yeah, she's super hinged. Like her door is swinging, you know, and it latches. And so I also think it's kind of an unfair, even like edging into misogynistic sort of trope, you know, like larger idea, because just because women are doing bad things, or female characters are doing bad things, does not make them unhinged. It just makes them human and
women
interesting.
kill people.
Women kill people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally slay.
They
Literally.
Literally.
So I've lived in New York's for over 8 years now, and there's a passage that I know you want to read
for you.
And there's a passage that we have bookmarked that I would love for you to read from, because I annotate my books. I underline, highlight, write in the margins, and I wrote "I love New York" in the margins. So would love for you to.
It's been waiting for you.
Yeah. Anyone else go to the Eras tour? Me too. You told me that this book is a love letter to New York City.
It is. Yeah, very much.
So I'd love to have you speak on that.
New York City may have a commercial skin, but it's built on the skeleton of sex and magic. The bridges hang like jewels around the throat of the night, and the rivers unspool in endless runners of oily gray silk charmeuse. In the soulless corporate canyons of Midtown, the buildings point accusatory fingers at the uncaring sky. The streets flow with an endless human wash, so many people running like dumbstruck salmon, looking for love, looking for money, looking for a place to eat, wanting for fame, hoping for a place to sleep, hoping for a person to sleep with, praying for meaning in the dark before dawn. It's easy to get lost in the magic that is Manhattan, not only because you're one in a million, but also because the city pulls you tight in its steely embrace. Expletives fly like art, traffic blares loud and comforting, bodegas welcome you with anonymous yellow light and the salt, vinegar, and sugar smell of steam tables. Everywhere you go, there is something wonderful, if only you open your heart, your mind, your wallet, or your thighs. Like Venice, New York City is an improbable bunch of rivaling islands, held together by historic bridges, a common language, and a well-earned understanding of superiority. Rome may dwell in the land of cock, and it does. The phallus dominates that city's skyline. Roman men strut with unquestioned self-confidence, their limbs decked in crimson, in mustard, in peacock blues and greens, each demanding your gaze. But as much as the long penile lines of skyscrapers may define New York City, it's a place that doesn't care who fucks whom as long as you do it. Fucking, metaphorical or literal, is New York City's soul. Fucking with, fucking up, fucking over, fucking around, fucking right, New York fucking City has earned its name. It makes perfect sense that I felt at home on its streets. The catcalls of men were a comfort. The year I moved to New York, I pried Emma from Boston to spend New Year's Eve in Manhattan. You need to meet a proper city, I told her, one whose bars don't close until 4. We scaled the wrought iron gates to the Central Park Zoo, and wandering somnolent grounds in the dusky chill, we swigged crew from the bottle and toasted to Gus, the neurotic polar bear, what other kind would live on Fifth Avenue. Until two security guards made us leave. We hopped the subway and took the train to Houston Street, passing the Duck Man, the Soho fixture who nightly pushed a shopping cart of plush Donald Duck knockoffs. We waved and we weaved our way to Eat Tremerly, a very loud and rather awful bar, but terribly chic restaurant on West Broadway. Emma wore a long black vintage tutu over fishnets and John Fluvog boots. I had on a black leather catsuit. We made a spectacle of ourselves, drunk and young and gleaming with promise and promiscuity.
Stop there. So, what about your experience in New York do you want to come across in this book?
Oh, wow. Okay. I drew a lot on my own experience in moving here in 1989 when I wrote this book. The very first agent that I showed this to, I gave it to her and she was like, well, it's very 80s. And I said, yes, I love the 80s. And she goes, well, the prose is very 80s. And I said, uh-huh. And she goes, well, it's got to be flattened out. And, you know, she did a line edit that made me put the book, at this point it was printed out in a binder, on a shelf for 8 months and forget it, because I was just so crushed. And a lot of what I came to in writing this book, a lot of the things that I thought about were Tama Janowitz's Slaves of New York. And these stories of like scrabbling together this like artistic life during a time when you could do that in Manhattan. You know, like my first apartment was like $600 a month, you know? And I know it is
Pure pain.
it is, I mean, you know, I still have a really good deal, but yeah, I mean, so like I came to writing this book with this idea, like I really wanted to draw on my own experience. Like my first job was at Eat Tremerly. I was a hostess. The Duckman would pass, you know, push his cart past every night, you know, like there were so many moments that I put into the book that were, you know, things that I, just little snippets that I had lived. As much as Dorothy has these, you know, love affairs with men, and as much as I think her true romantic relationship is with Emma, I think like the city is equally her partner.
I love that. Let's talk about Emma, because that's the most endearing part of the book for me. And reading about that relationship kind of reminded me of Dolly Alderton's Everything I Know About Love, which is just an ode to female friendship and the intimacy of it. So if Dorothy is kind of your projection of rage, who is Emma to you?
Emma is the ethical heart of the book. Like if Dorothy is this complete lack of conscience, like, you know, basically working off id, like Emma is the she's the conscience, she's the center. And I didn't know she was going to be in the book when I first, you know, like she was just showed up in Dorothy's, you know, dorm room, and then she came back in Boston, and then she came back in. I was like, oh, okay, this is an actual thing. And then I realized that her role was actually, you know, integral to the overarching arc of the book. And you know, for me, female friendships have, in no small part because I was single for so many decades, they have always been like the most important relationships that I have in my life. And so I think that, you know, as well as some of the most frustrating. And so, you know, like the Emma thing was about, was trying to write into the book and into my expression of this character the capacity for humanity.
All right, let's talk about cannibalism. Delicious. I just finished Yellow Jackets for the record. Like, please come talk about it with me after. I want all of your theories. But I know you have a background as a food writer. And reading this book made me very hungry a lot of the time because you're writing these gorgeous descriptions of food and these wonderful meals Dorothy's having, and then you also write about how she prepares her lovers for a meal, and it kind of can put the reader in an uncomfortable position to have your mouth drooling while she's like cooking a liver. So I'd love to know the research that you did on the topic, because Dorothy's narration is so precise and exact in how she conducts these murders and how she cooks these men. And then also overall, why do you think our culture is so obsessed with cannibalism right now?
So the initial choice to do the cannibalism, other than the love, pray, eat, was I knew my skills were in depicting sensory experiences in writing. So I, hey, I'm gonna do the thing I know how to do, as I'm doing the thing that I have no fucking clue what I'm doing. Because I didn't go to school for writing. I didn't have any, I didn't have a writer's group. I had jack shit. And so there was that. And then the books come from our unconscious, fiction comes from your brain. And so there were a bunch of also unconscious feelings and thoughts that were kind of rolling around, things having to do with my own sort of borderline disordered eating, things having to do with my anger at controlling specifically female appetites, my frustration with the way that food writing and food culture was playing out in the world, my outright disgust and anger at agri-farming. So there were also a bunch of kinds of things that went along. When I was researching, I'm sure I'm on some FBI watch list. And there were a lot of what parts of a person do you eat? And watching butchering videos on YouTube. I did that. I mean butchering of chickens. There's a lot of homesteading of chicken farming. Then I have several books of about the history of cannibalism. There's this wonderful writer, Bill Shute, who wrote Cannibalism, A Thoroughly Natural History. I had read his book on sanguivores, blood eaters, called Dark Banquet. And then I read his Cannibalism. We're actually kind of, acquaintances. So I read his book, and I just did a bunch of kind of research, and then I made shit up. Because that's what you do when you're writing. And I think that cannibalism is having a moment right now because it's an incredibly plastic metaphor. If you are not on that airplane in the middle of, the Canadian Rockies, having to eat to survive, the moment you finish that last bite, it becomes no longer literal, it becomes metaphoric. The moment you tell the story, it's a metaphor. So cannibalism, like vampirism or zombies, is an incredibly flexible plastic metaphor. It has to do with our uneasiness about eating meat. It has to do with our concern about the climate crisis. It has to do with our uneasiness with the late stage capitalism. It has to do with, especially if you're talking about women, but I think also for men or people who, don't fall into either camp, this sense of being consumed, whether by the gaze or that's Gaze, or by your job, or by if you're not by media, whatever it may be. And so I think right now we're having a cannibalism moment because all of these things are kind of coming into play in a really real way. And frankly, because more women are able to, get stuff on TV. And also because, the Soylent Green was set in 2022.
The what?
Soylent Green, It's Made from People, was set in 2022. That was the future. And as it turns out, Charlton Heston was right.
I haven't seen the Timothy Chalamet
Bones and All?
Yeah, Bones and All. I haven't
Yeah.
seen that yet, but I watched Fresh, I watched Yellow Jackets. So if there's any other cannibalist recommendations that you guys have for me, please let me know. I'm kind of diving down a rabbit hole after this book. But I heard some rumblings that you're working on something else right now. What's next for you?
Well, so Alexander G, who's a really great writer and he gives terrific writing advice, and wrote a whole book on it. So go out and buy that. His advice is never to tell the truth, like never give the actual answer to that
lie
question.
to us.
Yeah, so it's a fictionalization of the life of Mata Hari. Mata Hari?
I don't know.
Oh, dude.
Oh. Is this a rabbit hole I have to go down?
Yeah. It is some bizarre. Yeah.
I'm gonna be on Wikipedia later. I'm so excited.
Indo-Dutch bullshit right up in that bitch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't wait.
Yeah.
So we're gonna open up to a Q&A shortly, but whenever I host author interviews for SAFLIT, I do a rapid fire round. So short questions, short answers, and I'd love to start with, what are you currently reading?
I am reading I'm reading Jeff Charlotte's The Undertow, and then I'm also reading this mad, British fantasy book about this woman who's a doctor for monsters, and she's like, I don't remember, I bought it for $2, and it's fun and it's pointless. Yeah.
Sometimes you need to read something pointless.
Totally.
Yeah.
There's nothing, they're vampires, so there's some points.
Love. What is a book, besides A Certain Hunger, that you recommend everyone read?
So my trio is Patrick Susskind's Perfume, Geek Love, and Jeanette Winterson's The Passion. Those are the three.
Write those down. So if you could have dinner with anyone dead or alive, who would it be? This can also
After
be
Ben.
After Ben.
Yeah, no question. After Ben. I would have dinner with After Ben.
I was like, it could be a dinner party. You can have multiple people.
It would just be me and Afro Ben and a lot of 18th century chicken.
Incredible.
And milk punch with raspberries.
I love. Favorite class you took at university?
Yeah.
You can skip.
Tell the truth.
I don't know. What was my favorite
Or least
class?
favorite?
Oh, yeah, no, that's bad. Yeah, it's all a wash. A lot of it was great, and then some of it was not
Crap.
awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Favorite cannibal movie or TV show?
Oh, I love Yellow Jackets. I've watched the entire thing 3 times.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Worthy. All right, so I know you have a hot Swedish husband. You talk about him a bit on social. What do you cook for your husband?
Well, he has a very basic Swedish palate. There are a lot of reasons to go to Sweden. Food is not one of them. I regularly am in Sweden and I'm thinking, and I couldn't have married an Italian. So I do cook. And I also cook a lot of things for him that I personally can't eat because I have stupid food issues. Not disordered eating food issues, but like I have allergies and things. So I make him like, you know, meatballs and spaghetti bolognese and, you know, various chicken, do roast chicken like once a week, because then you can take the bones and turn it into, you know, all kinds of things. Yeah, so that's yeah.
And how would you cook him?
I would never eat my husband.
Okay, if you were Dorothy, then fictional land, man dead. How would you cook? Like what body part, what method, like what are you
specifically husband?
No, just like
I mean, like, I would
What
say,
wine
I mean, like,
pairing?
if it was my husband, he's got this really like completely like white, like hairless skin, so I would totally roast him like a little second pig.
Incredible.
I'm
Apple
sure
in the
his-
mouth and
I'm sure
everything.
his, yeah, I'm sure his skin would be really nice.
Crispy.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for answering all of my questions.
Sure.
Anyone got any questions for Chelsea? Yeah.
So I really enjoyed hearing about your writing process, and I love hearing about like deleted scenes, alternate endings. Was there ever a moment in the writing process where you thought she's gonna get away with it?
No.
Or from the beginning? So
No.
I would love to hear about that.
So I knew, because it was a memoir, the big problem I had to solve was, why would she tell this story? And the only reason why she would tell this story is she's in prison. So I couldn't have her get away, because then, unless I had it, you know, have her like do it in a way that it was chronological, which I had no interest in. I mean, I like reading chronological stories. I just didn't want to write one. So like, yeah, there was never I did rewrite the ending no fewer than 12 times. Not that it changed tremendously, but just that it had to become good. It was in a place for a long time where it was bad, and it had to be less bad. Yeah, there were a few deleted scenes. There were some like throwaway lines that I threw that were just like, no, this is too blue even for Dorothy. So like, they were bad. It was bad. It came from a dark place of my unconscious. There was one deleted scene that I kind of wish I'd been able to keep in, but it narratively didn't make sense. She and Marco go to this little like 3-star, you know, Michelin restaurant that has rooms above it, and which happens a lot in Italy. That's pretty. It's basically where you bring your mistress. You know, you have a really good dinner, and then you go up. If you're friends with the owner, you spend enough money, you get one of the rooms upstairs, and you know, you go to town. I don't know why you would after a dinner, but whatever. And where they basically eat a petting zoo. You know, like there's ducks, there's chickens, there's bunnies, there's baby goats. Like, so I really wish I kind of kept, but I couldn't make it work.
It's giving like Dutch masters still life.
Yeah.
Not to be art history again.
Firstly, I absolutely love the color coordination of these outfits.
This was so unintentional.
Yeah, I was gonna wear something completely different, and I was just like,
And I was like, this is my outfit. And she was like, I'm also wearing green. I was like, I'm not changing.
Respectfully, you both look hot. 10 out of 10.
Thank you.
My question was, you guys talked about how Emma was really sort of like the heart and like her love story in a sense for this. Why was Alex so important to have in here as well?
Well, it was important to me to have a reason why. And it, why did she, like, the story went from being, does she get caught, to why does she do it, And she says no to Alex, but she still wants to keep these people she wants to have attachment. She wants to keep these guys with her. So, like she had the accidental on purpose, Giovanni. So then she revisits that with her other ex-lovers. And so Alex comes before, and it can be a little hard to, he comes before she kills Andrew and Gil and Casimir. So it was a way of like keeping these guys with her even after they're no longer with her.
I have a part B to this question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Do you think now that she, like, if she wasn't in prison, and she had a second chance, would she kill Alex too?
Oh, for sure. No question. Yeah, without a doubt.
He's the one that got away.
He is. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello. During the writing of this, I know for me, when I have certain projects that I'm doing, it's very important, like food is very important during those times. So it's like, oh, I'm eating a particular thing, or, snacking at a particular hour. Like, and I know, like, if you're in the middle of a stressful project, you're freaking out. What was your kind of eating process as you were writing?
Well, the only thing that got really unusual was when I did the copy edits, which for Unnamed, which happened in like, I think it was like late July, early August, like those 2 weeks, which is, the time. If you're gonna eat produce, you're gonna eat it in those 2 weeks. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna go raw vegan. Like, I'm somebody, like, periodically I'll be like, I'm gonna try this weird physical thing, whatever it may be, like, and so I was like, I'm gonna go raw vegan. As it turns out, raw vegan is like 60% your mandolin and 40% cashews. So I went raw vegan for 2 weeks during the whole copy editing, which, as I was like rereading the gore, I was like, yeah, no, this is good. This was a good decision. Yeah, props to me. Yes.
Hi. So a lot of writers get very, and I say this lovingly, precious about their characters, where this is someone who's real to them and someone whom they talk to, someone who talks to them. Other writers I've found are completely the opposite, very clinical, they write the book, it's done. I'm very curious about where you fall on that spectrum, both in your process of writing this and sort of how, if at all, Dorothy has stayed with you after the completion of this book and the blowing up that then transpired.
Yeah, so Dorothy was great to write. I am a very insecure writer. And so being able to inhabit this person with unshakable self-confidence really powered my ability to finish it, because I was just in it. She does not second guess herself at all, except for when she killed Gil, which was, like, that was it. Like, so I get into the middle of the scene, I'm like, oh my God, I totally fucked this up. I'm gonna have to scrap the whole thing because there's just so many things that went wrong. And I was like, well, all right, what would WWDD, like, what would Dorothy Daniels do? And I just made her solve the problems. So like, now that it's over, I realize there's a whole bunch of things that writing Dorothy allowed me to access, allowed me to process. There is no fucking way I would be married if I hadn't written this book. Not because I would be like too busy doing other, but because it allowed me to really put to rest a lot of my rage and frustration with dating. And so I think of Dorothy as like a memory that was super helpful and I look forward to whatever happens to her in the future. TV money. But beyond that, like, I don't really have a sense of like, and people misread her, and that's fine, whatever. That's happening inside their heads. I have no control over that.
Hijacking the Q&A to ask, who would you cast as Dorothy Daniels?
Okay, so my Hollywood answer is Uma Thurman.
Yes.
Okay.
My slightly less Hollywood answer is Gwendolyn Christie. And then my next, like, least Hollywood answer is Cameron Manheim in her prime.
Oh, yes.
Because I really feel like I really feel like that's the body that Dorothy would have. Like, there's no way you can do this kind of eating and maintain an Uma body. So like in an ideal world, that is sort of, and Dorothy, like people are like, you wrote this like conventionally attractive. I'm like, I never say anything about the way she looks, other than the fact that she's got red hair, high cheekbones, and she's 6 feet tall. Beyond that, we know jack shit. We don't know the size of her thighs. We don't know the size of her belly. We don't know what size clothes she wears. We don't know anything. And like, so when people are like, you are conventionally attractive, I'm like, no, I didn't. That's you, baby. You made her conventionally attractive. I just wrote this red-haired tall woman who thinks she's hot as shit. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Hi.
Hi. I love you.
I love you too.
Where in the writing process did you feel like you were really coming into the voice that ultimately was this book?
Yeah, so I read, so in preparing to write the book, I reread American Psycho, and I read the first 2 parts of Eat, Pray, Love, and I tapped out about 3/4 of the way through Pray. I was just like, no, I'm done. I'm done with the handstands. Like, we're done. And I do not need to know love. And then at some point when I really got into really writing it, which was like 2014, I edited my friend Molly Crabapple's memoir, Drawing Blood, which is really great. And her work ethic is like a dancer's. Like she just does the thing. She does the thing, and I would say, well, this part really sucks. And she'd be like, okay. And then like 2 days later, I would get an entirely rewritten thing that didn't suck. And I'm like, oh, I'm so chastened by this. And so, after doing that, I was like, all right, I gotta finish this fucking book. So this is 2014. So I read, like, again, the first 2 or 3 chapters of Ruth Reichel's Save Me the Plums. And I got her voice, and I was like, and I'm done. I'm good. This is it. I got it. We're good. Yeah. So I would say it was about, like after a bunch of fits and starts, I really nailed it at the beginning of 2014.
Hi.
Hey.
One of the things that I love about the book is the intersection of food and class. And so, particularly, I'm thinking about how Dorothy has this whole thing about how she's never fucked a chef, but she did lose her virginity to a fry cook. And I'm wondering, I know you have experience with the food world, and in many ways, this is a critique of the way that the food world has evolved over the last 30 years. And so, I'm interested to hear more about sort of your, I suppose, class analysis of the food media as you see it and as Dorothy sees it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the menu did a really great job.
I was going to ask if you'd seen the menu. And
she must have been filming it at the time, but Anya Taylor-Joy read my book, put it up on her Instagram. Bless her little Brazilian British heart. Because she did that right before it came out in paperback, and all of a sudden, like, the want to read on Goodreads went from like a couple thousand to like 20,000, and I was like, yeah. And so, like, I kind of like the menu. It really bothers me that we tend to see food as a thing that, like good food, thing that can only be accessed if you have a lot of money, if you have taste, whatever that means. If you have, you know where to go, and you can get a reservation, and you can get in, and you can, have that experience. Oh my God, it's great. And that's not how food is. Food is a communion between people, and at the same time, like, we also have this like flip side in America where, food is one of the great signs of inequity. Like, it's not that we don't use food deserts anymore. It's food, like what's the term that instead of food desert, where you don't have good stores for shopping, and and to not have access to food is a overturning of a fundamental human right. And then at the same time, we have this whole thing where food becomes glorified through TV and taking pictures of your, and taking pictures of your dishes and putting them on Instagram. That's fine, knock yourself out. But also, it's like, the Yelpification of, it's like this some sort of democratization of stuff that doesn't matter and isn't really working for anybody. And all of that stuff really makes me very cranky.
To put it simply. Two
Okay.
more?
Have you had any interest from movie or TV in optioning it?
Oh yeah, it's optioned. It's been optioned since 2020. So before it came out, it was optioned by Paramount. Right now, like the showrunner is not able to work on it because WGA.
Who was negotiating with Uma?
I hope so. I mean, she would be able to do that as a role as producer, but she can't work on the script. So yeah.
Do you expect it to happen at some point?
Gotta, who knows? Let's all touch something. Exactly.
We're manifesting.
All right.
All right, last question. All the way in the back.
I'll speak loud.
Okay.
My question is a little bit of like a two-parter. I guess what I really loved about this book was like the juxtaposition between like the heinous, calculated murder and then the beautiful artistry of actually cooking. And I guess I wonder, I don't want to use the word easier, but I guess what came to you sooner, which you found you felt more fondly working on.
Yeah.
And the second question.
Okay. Okay, let me just do that first, because otherwise I'll forget. So the writing about food, because I've been working as a wine copywriter since 2011. That's my day job, and basically has been nonstop. It comes to me pretty easily. I can just kind of slip into that language. And I spent a lot of time Googling on Italian Google and looking at recipes and, trying to figure out what would actually work here. And Italian Google has great recipes. I totally support it. But the gore was something I really had to work on because I kept on wanting to become more and more embodied. When I wrote this book, my idea was I want people to be hungry, horny, and horrified. And so I really kept on going over the gore over and over and over again to make sure that it felt as realistic and as gross as possible. And at one point I was having coffee with Warren Ellis and I was like, Warren, how do you write the gore? I'm writing this book, what advice do you have? And he's like, whatever, he's got a British accent. Sweetie, you just go for it. I was like, okay, I will do that. And I just did it over and over again until it felt visceral. I really chose the style of writing because I wanted to feel chewy. I wanted it to feel like your mouth is full. I wanted it to feel sticky. I wanted it to feel wet. I wanted it to feel chunky. I wanted there to be some kind of, I didn't want a beautiful window pane, glass-like surface, which I love in prose, but for this, I really wanted it to feel visceral. Okay, part 2.
So, how did you come to decide what part of what
Guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Giovanni was there the liver was, just popping out perfect, and he's a vegan, so what else, and she's in Italy, so what else are you gonna do? Andrew's a bike racer and he's got this beautiful, butt, so I went with the butt, and then Gil, because she had taught him how to eat, I went with the tongue, and of course that went kind of awry because he had the whole anaphylactic shock. And then with Marco, because of their history of eating tripe, I went with the stomach, and also brisket because brisket is brisket. Yeah.
Brisket is brisket. All right. That's that. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you.
you all so much for coming out tonight. Thank you especially to everyone who asked such wonderful questions. Thank
Can
you
we
to
bring me your
Nina.
book? Just bring it.
Thank you, Nina, for moderating this conversation. Of course, thank you, Chelsea, for celebrating this wonderful book with us.
Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, she will be signing and personalizing books at the little alcove. My coworker Jules is pointing to where that is right now. It's a little bit hidden, but it'll all make sense in a little bit. We ask that you all line up down the center aisle and kind of curve around to the wall. Please make sure that you grab all of your personal belongings with you so that our staff can start to rearrange the space. If you don't have a copy yet, we have plenty of additional ones available for purchase. So just see our coworkers up at the front. All right, that's all. Thanks so much for coming.